Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're basically performing open heart surgery on a topic that I think most people assume they understand, but almost nobody actually does.
Oh, definitely. It is the absolute classic tip of the iceberg scenario.
Right. We are looking at SAP sales and distribution, which most people just call SD. Because if you ask like a layperson or honestly even a junior consultant what SD is, they will usually just tell you it's selling stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Selling stuff.
Yeah. You get an order, you put a widget in a box, you send an invoice to the customer. It sounds very linear. It sounds simple.
And that exact mindset, that it's just a straight line, is exactly why so many ERP implementations completely fail.
Which is exactly the hook for today's deep dive. We've got this massive stack of source documentation here, and it frames SD not just as a standalone module, but really as a nervous system.
A nervous system is a great way to put it. Yeah, or like this massive vibrating spider web that touches every single other organ in the corporate body. We aren't just talking about typing up sales orders here. The guide refers to SD as the engine of order to cash.
Yes, the engine. And I think that's the core metaphor we really need to stick with today. SD is the engine. But here is the reality check for anyone listening. An engine sitting by itself on a cold concrete floor does absolutely nothing.
Right.
I mean, it's just a heavy block of metal. For that engine to actually run and create value, it needs fuel. In SAP, that fuel is materials management, or MM. It needs instructions and a destination, which is production planning, PP.
And it needs a speedometer and a strict governance system, right? Which would be finance, FINCO.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so if the engine stalls out, the guy sitting in the driver's seat, usually your sales director, he usually just screams at the engine. He blames SD.
Naturally, because that's the screen he's looking at.
Exactly. But if you actually diagnose the system, the problem is rarely the engine itself. It's usually, a fuel line blockage over in the warehouse, or maybe a sensor failure in accounting.
So our mission today, for you, the listener, is to take you from being a functional consultant who just memorizes transaction codes and elevate you into a true solution architect, someone who actually sees the entire machine.
That's the goal. We are going to look really closely at the handshake.
The handshakes, I like that.
Yeah, like how does SD physically reach out and grab the hand of MM, FICO, and PP? Because if you don't understand the grip of that handshake, you cannot possibly fix the break when things go wrong.
I love that framing. So let's start with the fuel, like you mentioned. The critical link, integration with materials management. The source material is actually pretty blunt about this. It says without MM, SD is basically just selling imaginary air.
It is entirely binary. I mean, you can sit there and type up a sales order for 1 million Ferraris if you want to.
It's like a good day for a sales rep.
Right, a great commission. But if MM doesn't validate that those 1 million Ferraris actually physically exist in the yard, or at least that the parts exist to build them, you haven't actually sold anything at all. You have just typed out a very expensive fantasy.
So let's dig into the actual mechanics of that validation, the availability check, which we call ATP.
From reading the documentation, this seems to be the single biggest source of friction between sales teams and supply chain teams.
Oh, it is an absolute war zone in most companies. It is the exact place where the dream of the sale violently meets the cold, hard reality of the warehouse.
So walk us through what the source calls the gotcha scenario. Put us in the shoes of the user. Let's say I'm a sales rep. I'm on the phone with a really hot lead. I look at my screen, specifically transaction MMBE, the stock overview.
Standard move.
Right. And I look at the screen and I see exactly 1,000 widgets sitting in my warehouse, unrestricted use. So I tell the customer on the phone, yep, absolutely, we have them in stock. I go to book the order and the system just slams the door in my face. It says confirmed quantity, 0.
So now I look like a liar to my client. And to me, the sales rep, the SAP system, looks completely broken. What just happened in the background?
What just happened is that you, as the user, completely confused inventory with availability. And you have to understand they are not the same thing at all.
Explain the difference.
So MMBE, the screen you were looking at, it just shows you a physical count. It's a literal snapshot of what is sitting on the concrete at this exact second. But ATP, available to promise, that is a calculation of the future.
Ah, okay. So the system is actually thinking about time, not just physical space.
Correct. The system looks at those 1,000 widgets you saw at an MMBE and says, sure, yeah, they are physically sitting here right now. But then it immediately checks the background reservations.
Which the sales rep can't easily see on that MMBE screen.
Exactly. The system knows that maybe 800 of those widgets are already allocated to a massive delivery for your biggest corporate client, and that truck ships tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And maybe another 100 of them are strictly reserved for safety stock because your company's risk policy dictates you can never ever let the bins run completely dry.
And what about the last 100?
Maybe that last 100 got flagged this morning and are tied up in a quality inspection because the pallets looked damaged when they arrived.
Wow. So effectively, even though you have 1,000 physical boxes, you have exactly 0 actually available to promise to this new customer on the phone.
Precisely. And if you want to be the architect who actually solves this issue for the business, you have to train them to stop looking at MMBE. You go to the real truth teller, transaction C09.
C09. That honestly sounds like a secret agent code.
It effectively is the secret weapon for an SD architect. This is the availability overview. It actually shows you the math.
What kind of math are we talking about?
It shows the physical stock, yes, but then it subtracts the outward movements, it subtracts the safety stock, and importantly, it also adds the incoming purchase orders that haven't arrived yet. It explains exactly why your confirmed number is 0.
So it's the difference between seeing a car sitting in a parking lot and actually knowing if the keys to that car are available to hand to someone.
That is a perfect analogy, yes.
Now, getting slightly technical for a second, what actually controls the brain behind that math? Is that just hard-coded into SAP out of the box?
Oh no, it's highly configurable, and honestly, that is exactly where the danger lies. The whole brain of ATP is controlled by a configuration point called OVZ9. It's a matrix combination of two things, the checking group and the checking rule.
Okay, we need to break those down. Because to me, checking group and checking rule sound like the exact same thing.
I know, SAP naming conventions strike again. Think of the checking group as a permanent property of the product itself. It lives right on the material master record.
So it's tied to the specific widget.
Right. It basically tells the system how we track this specific item. Like, do we aggregate the demand daily to save system performance? Or do we calculate every single individual order in real time? It's the overarching inventory strategy for that specific material.
Okay, that makes sense. So what is the checking rule then?
The checking rule is dynamic. It comes from the specific transaction you were doing at that exact moment. So a sales order transaction asks the system a fundamentally different question than a delivery note transaction does.
Give me a real-world example of how that differs. Why would creating a sales order ask a different question than creating a delivery?
Well, think about the context. A sales order is naturally optimistic, right? You might be looking weeks or even months into the future. So the checking rule for a sales order might be configured to say, hey, go ahead and include purchase orders that are arriving from our vendor next week as available stock.
Because by the time we actually need to ship it to the customer, our vendor will have already delivered it to us.
Exactly. The system is allowed to legally bet on future incoming supply.
But a delivery note is different.
Radically different. A delivery note represents a literal truck backing up to your loading dock. It's happening right now.
Yeah.
So the checking rule for a delivery says, I do not care what vendor PO is arriving next Tuesday. What can I put onto a forklift today? It has to be incredibly conservative. It cannot load a future promise onto a physical truck.
Wow. So this OVZ9 config matrix allows you to be strategically risky in your sales department, but completely conservative and grounded in your shipping department.
You nailed it. And if you mess up that configuration, like let's say you make the delivery checking rule too optimistic, you are going to print a physical shipping label for a ghost box that isn't there.
And the warehouse guys are going to be walking around looking for empty space.
And they will scream at IT. Conversely, if you make the sales checking rule too conservative and you ignore incoming POs, your sales reps are going to lose out on major deals they actually could have fulfilled.
That is a wildly delicate balance to strike.
It is the art of the architect.
All right, let's move down the timeline a bit. We've successfully promised the goods to the customer. Now we actually have to ship them.
Yeah.
The handover. The source guide spends a lot of time on the PGI, the post-goods issue.
The absolute point of no return.
Now, why is PGI the defining line in the sand? Why isn't the defining moment when the physical truck actually drives out of the front gate of the facility?
Because PGI is the digital handshake. Up until the exact second a user clicks PGI in the system, that stock is technically still yours. It's sitting on your books. It is your company's financial asset. But the very moment you execute PGI, two massive tectonic plates shift instantly inside the ERP system.
Tectonic plates. I really like that imagery. What are the two plates?
Plate 1 is materials management. The physical inventory quantities instantly drop in the system. The bin shows as empty. Plate 2 is finance. The monetary value of that inventory moves directly off your balance sheet as an asset and transfers over to your P&L as cost of goods sold, an expense.
Because legal ownership has officially transferred to the customer. So, just to be morbid for a second, if that delivery truck drives out the gate, turns the corner, and gets into a fiery crash 5 minutes after someone clicked PGI, that's the customer's problem, not ours.
Generally speaking, based on standard Incoterms, yes. This system considers the sale totally executed at the moment of PGI. The value is gone from your books.
And this whole process is driven by what the source calls movement types. The guide basically refers to these as the holy grail for SAP consultants. Like, you can't just tell the system, ship it. You have to speak the exact numerical code.
Yeah, you really have to memorize the periodic table of elements for inventory. For example, 601 is your absolute bread and butter. That is your standard sales order goods issue. Stock goes down, cost goes up.
But what about when things go wrong? Because the source spends a surprisingly large amount of time discussing returns. And this part felt very nuanced to me. It specifically contrasted movement type 651 with movement type 653.
Oh, this is a brilliant example because choosing between those two codes is a massive strategic decision for a company. It is not just IT configuration.
Yeah, walk us through it.
Okay, let's say you sell electronics and a customer returns a laptop. It arrives at your receiving dock. If your system is configured to use movement type 653, the system takes that return laptop and aggressively throws it straight back into unrestricted stock.
Meaning it's instantly available for the ATP check to promise to the very next customer.
Immediately, within milliseconds. The system assumes that returned laptop is in absolutely pristine, perfect condition, which is incredibly efficient if the laptop was returned sealed in the box just because the customer changed their mind.
Right, but what if it was returned because the motherboard is fried or the screen is cracked?
Well, then you just promised a broken laptop to your next loyal customer.
Oh, man. So you've essentially automated a customer service disaster.
Exactly. You're efficiently shipping garbage, all because your movement type configuration was way too optimistic.
So a 653 is the sort of cowboy, high-risk approach.
It is definitely the cowboy approach. The standard recommendation, the safe play, is usually movement type 651.
And how does 651 act as the safety net?
651 brings the return stock back into your plant, but it logically routes it into a very specific quarantined bucket called blocked stock returns.
So it's isolated.
Completely. And importantly, it is non-valuated. It just sits there in quarantine. It absolutely does not show up as for sale to your sales reps. It just waits there until a human being physically opens the box, inspects the laptop, and makes a conscious decision if it's trash or if it's treasure.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of incredible when you step back and realize how a single 3-digit code in the background basically dictates a multi-million-dollar company's entire quality control policy.
It completely dictates your operational risk profile. And frankly, a good solution architect will fight tooth and nail for 651. A lazy consultant will usually just implement 653 because it requires fewer steps and less training for the warehouse staff.
Wow. Okay, before we leave the integration entirely, we have to talk about the scenario where we don't even physically touch the goods at all. Third-party sales, or what most people call drop shipping, the whole Amazon business model.
Oh, this is the ultimate test of your integration knowledge. Because in this scenario, SD basically stops looking at the warehouse altogether and starts actively talking to the purchasing department.
So set the stage. I'm a distributor. I sell a massive industrial generator to a customer. But I don't actually have it in my warehouse, and I don't ever want to. I want the original manufacturer to ship it directly to my customer. How does SD even trigger that? Usually, SD is frantically looking for physical stock.
It triggers a fascinating chain reaction. And it all starts on the sales order screen with something called the item category. The standard code for this is TAS.
TAS. Got it.
When the SAP system reads that TAS category on the line item, it instantly ignores the warehouse. It completely shuts down that complex ATP check we just talked about.
Because there's no point checking our bins if we aren't shipping it.
Exactly. Instead, in the background, without the sales rep doing anything, SD automatically generates a purchase requisition.
So the sales order effectively orders the goods from our vendor.
Well, it requests them. That internal purchase requisition automatically routes over to your purchasing team. They review it, and they convert it into a formal purchase order, a PO, which is officially sent out to your vendor. The vendor then builds the generator and ships it straight to your customer.
Okay, conceptually that's clean. But from a system perspective, wait, how do we get paid? And how do we know when to pay the vendor? We are totally blind to the physical movement.
And that is the absolute beauty of this integration chain. The vendor sends us a paper or electronic invoice. When our accounts payable team enters and verifies that invoice, which is called invoice receipt, the system fires a signal back to the original sales order.
It updates the SD side automatically.
Yes. It tells SD, okay, the vendor has legally claimed they shipped the goods and they are charging us. Then, and only then, does the system unlock the billing block and allow SD to finally generate an invoice to send to our customer.
So we physically cannot bill our customer until the vendor definitively proves they shipped the generator.
Exactly. The system locks it down to prevent massive fraud. It prevents you from accidentally billing your customer for things that haven't actually moved yet.
That's brilliant. And the specific hook in the configuration, the tiny little setting that tells the system, hey, do not try to deliver this, go buy it instead, that is the schedule line category.
Correct. The schedule line category is the secret sauce. It holds the movement type. So if it's a standard sale from our warehouse, the category holds movement type 601.
But if it's a drop ship?
If it's a drop ship, the movement type field in that category is just completely empty. Because we aren't actually moving anything. The vendor is.
That is a great tangible distinction. All right, let's follow the money here. Segment 2 of our outline, integration with financial accounting, or FI.
The scorecard.
Exactly. If MM is the physical body moving boxes around, FI is the scorecard keeping track of the points. And the source document highlights that the absolute #1 technical interview question for any SD consultant is about something called VKOA.
VKOA. Automatic account determination. I know, it sounds incredibly boring to non-finance people, but I promise you, it is the root source of about 90% of the "where is my money" panic attacks in any corporate office.
So frame the problem for us. Why is this so hard? Why do we need a complex table for this?
Think about the volume. You create a customer invoice in SD. That invoice has a total value of, say, $1,000. When you hit save, the ERP system absolutely must post that $1,000 somewhere into the general ledger in finance.
Right.
But which exact GL account? Is that $1,000 considered domestic product revenue? Is it international service revenue, intercompany sales, scrap sales?
And obviously a human being isn't sitting there staring at every invoice typing in GL account 4000 year 21.
God, no. First of all, the volume makes that impossible. Second, that would be a catastrophic compliance and audit nightmare. And humans make typos constantly.
What?
The system has to derive the exact GL account completely automatically, based entirely on the specific context of that unique sale.
And that's where VKOA comes in.
Right. VKOA is the master logic table. It's the treasure map that explicitly tells the system exactly where to bury the money in FI.
The source breaks this map down into variables. It seems almost like a combination lock.
It is exactly like a combination lock. It usually requires 5 specific keys to align perfectly to open the door to a GL account.
What are the keys?
It looks at the application, which is sales. It looks at the condition type, like is this revenue or a discount? It looks at your chart of accounts, your sales organization, and then it looks at the 2 really big variables.
Which are?
The account assignment group for the customer and the account assignment group for the material.
Okay, let's apply this lock to a real-world scenario. The guide actually gives a great troubleshooting example here. Let's pretend the CFO calls you the architect. He is absolutely furious. We just sold $1 million worth of consulting services, but when he looks at his P&L, that $1 million is showing up under hardware sales.
Oh, this is a classic brutal scenario. So now the hardware sales division looks like rock stars because their margins are artificially huge, and the services division looks like they haven't sold a single dime all quarter. People literally lose their annual bonuses over this exact error.
So as the architect, how do you fix that using VKOA logic? You don't just go type the money into the right account, right?
No, you never touch the ledger directly. You work backward to find the bad key. First, you look at the SD invoice. Then you look at the material in that invoice, which is consulting hour. You open up the material master record for consulting hour.
Okay.
There is a specific field on the sales org tab called account assignment group. Because since it's a service, it should say something like O2 services.
Well, let me guess.
But chances are the junior data entry person who created that material last year was in a hurry and they just copy-pasted an existing material to save time. And they copied a physical laptop. So the field still says O1 trading goods.
Ah. The silent killer of data integrity.
Copy paste. It gets us every time. So VKOA does its job perfectly. It sees the tag trading goods on the invoice line, and it dutifully routes the $1 million straight to the hardware GL account.
The system literally just did exactly what you told it to do. You just gave it the wrong instruction tag?
Exactly. The system isn't broken. Your data is. You fix the master data tag to say services, and suddenly the VKOA flow magically fixes itself for all future orders.
So VKOA isn't just some abstract technical table. It's a literal reflection of how your company strategically segments its business operations.
It forces you to rigidly define your business buckets. If you don't know your business, you can't configure VKOA.
Now, once that invoice actually hits the ledger, we are officially in accounts receivable, AR. The source mentions a concept here called the reconciliation account. And I know this is a concept that deeply confuses non-finance people.
Oh, absolutely. It is a very specific accounting mechanism. Think of it as a massive bridge.
A bridge between what?
Between the granular detail and the high-level summary. Look, your company might have 10,000 active customers buying things every day. You absolutely do not want 10,000 individual customer lines cluttering up your corporate balance sheet. That would be completely unreadable for investors.
Right. You just want one single summary line that says, accounts receivable, $50 million.
Exactly. So that summary line is the reconciliation account. It exists in the general ledger. But in the background, out of sight, the sub-ledger meticulously tracks every single dime customer A owes you versus customer B.
So how do they connect?
When SD posts an invoice for customer A in the subledger, the system automatically instantly updates the reconciliation account total on the main ledger.
Okay, here's a question. Can I, as an accountant, just post a journal entry directly to that reconciliation account? Like if I realize we are short, can I just manually add $50 to it?
Absolutely not. The system strictly forbids it. It will throw a hard red error. It's a crucial safety mechanism. The only possible way to change the grand total in the reconciliation account is to post a transaction to a specific individual customer's subledger balance. This guarantees that the sum of the details always perfectly matches the grand summary.
It prevents the books from ever getting mathematically out of sync.
Exactly. It forces integrity.
Speaking of safety mechanisms, let's pivot to the bouncer of the sales process. Credit management.
Ah, the gatekeeper.
We all generally understand the basic concept here, right? A customer is assigned a credit limit of, say, 100 grand. If they try to order more than their limit, the system blocks the order. Pretty straightforward.
Right.
But the source text brings up a much deeper configuration concept called update groups. And it specifically calls out something called update group 12. So why does an SD solution architect care so much about the number 12?
Because there are vastly different ways to mathematically calculate the question, how much money do you currently owe me? If I configure the system to only look at your unpaid posted invoices, I am missing a massive piece of the risk picture.
But wait, why? If I haven't officially invoiced you yet, you technically don't owe me anything yet.
Legally, maybe you're right, but practically, operationally, think about it. What about that massive order you placed yesterday that I am currently building but haven't shipped yet? I am actively reserving valuable stock for you.
For you.
Or even worse, what about the delivery that is currently sitting on a truck driving down the highway right now that I haven't generated the invoice for yet? I have already physically lost control of those goods.
So that is your total exposure.
Exactly. Exposure is the real metric. Update Group 12 is the S&P standard that explicitly tracks total exposure.
Which includes what, exactly?
It sums up open orders, plus open deliveries, plus open billing documents, plus your actual receivables. If you configure a lower update group, say one that lazily only checks open billing, you might let a risky customer order another $50,000 in goods just because their past invoices happen to be paid.
Not realizing they literally have $100,000 of your product currently sitting on a truck en route to them.
Exactly. You are deliberately blinding yourself to the actual risk. Update Group 12 is really the only way to genuinely protect the company's cash flow. It sees the risk long before it officially becomes debt.
That is a phenomenal breakdown. Let's pivot now to strategy, segment 3 of our guide. Integration with controlling, which is CO, and production planning, PP. This feels like the moment where we transition from legal external reporting to internal strategic decision-making.
It is. This is the absolute brain of the company. To put it simply, FI is for the IRS and the auditor, CO is for the CEO and the board.
And the undisputed star of the show in the CO module is Co-PA, profitability analysis. Now, I will admit I constantly hear junior consultants refer to Copier as this terrifying black box.
I hear that too, and it drives me crazy. It's not a black box at all. It is just a highly advanced data slicer. FI will simply tell you, congratulations, the company made $1 million in profit this month. That's great, but it's not actionable. Copier tells you, we made $1 million in profit specifically on blue widgets sold to the Walmart retail group in the Northeast region during the 3rd week of Q3.
It aggressively cuts the data into usable pieces.
It shreds it, and it does this using 2 main concepts: characteristics and value fields.
Break those down for us.
Characteristics are the who and the what. So that's your region, your customer group, your material type. The value fields are the how much. That's your gross revenue, your freight costs, your given discounts, your manufacturing cost.
Okay, so how does SD actually hand the data over to this Copier slicer? The source mentions a specific handshake transaction called KE4I.
KE4I is the critical mapping table. Look, in SD, your pricing procedure calculates everything using condition types. PR00 for the base price, KF100 for freight charges, K007 for a customer discount.
Right, those are standard SD elements.
But Copier doesn't speak condition type. It only speaks value field. So in KE4I, you explicitly wire those 2 languages together. You tell the system, every time you see the PR0 condition in SD, take that dollar amount and map it directly into the gross revenue value field in Copier.
So let's troubleshoot. What is my freight revenue column in my beautiful Copier profitability report is completely blank, but I absolutely know for a fact that sales reps have been charging customers for freight all month.
Then your wire is cut. It is that simple. You go into transaction KE4I, and I guarantee you will find that the KF100 freight condition isn't mapped to the freight revenue value field.
It's like putting a letter in the mail but forgetting to write the destination address on the envelope.
That's exactly it. The freight dollar amount successfully leaves SD, but it just vanishes into the ether. It never arrives in Copier.
Now, what about statistical conditions? The source guide dedicates a whole paragraph to these.
This is a really clever architectural trick. A statistical condition is a value that you calculate in the SD pricing procedure purely for informational purposes.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like maybe you want to know, what would the retail price of this order have been if we hadn't given them this massive wholesale discount?
Right.
You calculate it, but because it's marked as statistical, it does not ever hit the FI general ledger. It doesn't affect the actual customer invoice total.
So it's invisible to accounting. But does it hit Copier?
It absolutely can, and that is the powerful trick. You can map statistical conditions directly to Copier value fields via KE4I.
Wow. So even if that money never actually materializes in the company bank account, the CEO can still run a report and see the exact opportunity cost of the discounts the sales team is giving away.
Precisely. It gives management visibility into phantom numbers that FI doesn't care about.
That is incredibly powerful. All right, let's look at the production side now. PP. The source text makes a very sharp, distinct contrast between make-to-stock, MTS, and make-to-order, MTO.
This distinction essentially defines the entire cultural relationship between your sales representatives and your factory floor.
So in make-to-stock, do they even talk to each other?
Not really, no. In MTS, the factory floor builds products based purely on a high-level forecasting model. They blindly fill the warehouse with boxes.
And the sales rep.
The sales rep just takes boxes from the pile. If the pile is empty, the rep just has to wait until the factory builds more. The SAP planning strategies for this, like strategy 10, 11, or 4, these are all just mathematical variations of keep the pile full.
But make-to-order, that feels much more personal.
MTO, which is usually strategy 20 or 50, means the specific sales order is the actual trigger. The factory floor literally does not lift a single finger. They do not buy a single screw until you legally sell the item.
But the guide says this specific model leads directly to the problem of the hard peg.
Yes. Special stock E.
Tunnel stock E. Honestly, that sounds like a sci-fi villain.
Well, it definitely acts like a villain to a sales rep who doesn't understand it. This concept drives salespeople absolutely crazy.
Paint the picture for us.
Okay, imagine you are a sales rep. You have a massive rush order for customer Y. The CEO of customer Y is screaming for 100 units. You look in the SAP system, and miraculously, you see 100 finished units sitting right there in the warehouse.
I mean, my immediate reaction is, great, grab them and ship them.
Of course. So you try to create the delivery, and the system forcefully says no.
Why? They are physically right there on the shelf.
Because those 100 units were manufactured previously under a make-to-order scenario specifically for customer X, therefore they are designated as E-stock.
Which means?
It means they are logically permanently pegged to customer X's specific sales order number. They literally have a digital reserved sign bolted onto them. You physically cannot steal them to satisfy customer Y.
Even if customer X called and said they don't actually need them for another 3 months?
Even then, the system rigidly protects the MTO link.
So is there a technical workaround? Or are we just completely stuck staring at boxes we can't touch?
You can fix it, but SAP requires a conscious audited act to break that link. You have to have an inventory manager go in and perform a specific posting change in movement type 411E.
411E, what does that do?
You actively unpeg the goods. You strip the E status off, formally moving the inventory from sales order specific stock back into general unrestricted stock.
So you actively strip the digital reservation off the pallets?
Yes, which I assume is going to make customer X exceptionally unhappy when their delivery date finally arrives and their boxes are gone.
Extremely unhappy. But I guess the genius is that the system forces a human being to make that difficult moral choice consciously.
Yeah.
It simply won't let a sales rep steal the stock by accident.
Exactly. That is the true value of the hard peg. It forces the tough business decision to happen out in the open, rather than letting the ERP system quietly make a mess in the background.
That is brilliant. Okay, we're moving deeper through the web. Segment 4. The operational execution layer. Quality, warehousing, and projects. Let's start with quality management. QM, we touched on returns earlier, but QM really acts as a major bottleneck in the process, doesn't it?
It is the ultimate safety net. But yes, to the sales team, it usually feels like a massive bottleneck.
The source really highlights this concept of the usage decision.
Right. So when a broken return comes in on movement type 655, SD officially receives the goods back, but logically places them into quality inspection stock.
So it's in limbo.
Complete limbo. It is not yours to resell, and it is not yours to throw in the trash. It legally belongs to the quality manager now.
And until that specific quality manager logs into the system, runs their physical tests, and officially records a usage decision,
nothing moves, and this is the critical integration pain point. SD often is configured so that it cannot issue the financial credit memo refund to the customer until that UD is complete. So that is the friction. The customer is aggressively yelling at the sales rep for the refund. The sales rep is frantically yelling at the finance team. But the actual system holdup is a guy in a lab coat down in the warehouse who hasn't clicked approved on his screen yet.
Exactly. This happens constantly. If you don't actually understand the cross-module integration, you end up yelling at the wrong department. You don't need to yell at finance. You need to find the specific person with the usage decision authorization code and buy them a cup of coffee.
Let's shift gears slightly to warehouse management, WM. How does a WM integration fundamentally differ from standard inventory?
It is entirely a matter of resolution. Think of it like this. is a general map of the city. It knows you have 500 units located somewhere inside Plant 1000 storage location A.
Okay.
But WMM is the exact architectural blueprint of the house. WM knows those 500 units are specifically sitting in aisle 4, rack B, shelf 3, bin 12.
And the specific handshake mechanism between SD and WM is something called the transfer order. Yes, the TO. When the SD module creates an outbound delivery, it triggers the WM module to generate a transfer order. This is literally the digital instruction for the forklift driver. It says, drive to bin 12, pick up 10 boxes, and physically bring them to loading bay 4.
And here's the really common failure point the guide specifically mentions for troubleshooting. You absolutely cannot execute the PGI in SD if that transfer order is still open in WM.
Right. SD tries to execute the shipment, but WM yells back, hey, you can't officially ship this yet because technically it is still sitting on shelf 3. The forklift driver hasn't scanned the barcode to confirm the pick.
So if you are an SD user and your PGI button is randomly grayed out or it's throwing some weird status error,
don't immediately call an ABAP developer to look for a bug. Call the warehouse floor manager and ask if the physical pick has been confirmed on the scanners. 9 times out of 10, the boxes are just sitting on a cart waiting to be scanned.
It's amazing. Okay, the last piece in this operational trio, project systems. Yes, now this is generally for the really big stuff, right? Construction, building turbines, massive engineering jobs.
Right. These are long-cycle, incredibly high-value operations. You do not just throw a hydroelectric dam in a cardboard box, ship it, and send a single invoice. You bill it progressively over months or years. Milestone billing.
So how does SD possibly know when it's legally allowed to bill the customer? If we are building a massive skyscraper, Does the sales guy literally have to drive to the construction site every Friday to see if the concrete foundation is poured yet?
No, and that is the absolute beauty of the PS to SD integration. The specific line item on the SD sales order is technically linked to a WBS element.
WBS meaning work breakdown structure.
Exactly. It's a specific task node in the massive project plan. So the billing plan inside SD is rigidly locked to the completion status of that specific WBS element.
So when the actual project manager in the PS module marks the foundation phase as officially complete,
That action instantly, automatically removes the billing block over in the SD module. The milestone invoice practically generates itself in the overnight batch run.
wow.
It completely eliminates the need for the sales guy to harass the project manager every single Friday asking, hey, is it done yet? The SAP system itself becomes the communication channel.
And that is integration at its finest.
Okay.
And okay, that brings us to the final major stretch, segment 5 of our outline, the Solution Architect Toolkit. We spent a lot of time talking about how the machine works when it's humming. Now let's talk about how you diagnose it when it violently breaks down.
Which is honestly about 80% of the actual job for an architect, troubleshooting.
The source material identifies one specific database table as the absolute spine of the system, VBFA.
Document flow, yes. If you take literally only one single technical nugget away from this entire deep dive, it should be this. Memorize VBFA. Tattoo it on your arm.
Why is it the spine? What makes it so critical?
Because it mathematically links the entire history of the transaction. It explicitly connects the initial quote to the sales order. It connects the order to the delivery to the invoice, and the invoice to the final FI accounting document.
So let's say I am looking at a massive multi-million-dollar invoice, but it's completely orphaned. I have no idea who created it or what warehouse it shipped from.
You take that invoice number and you query table VBFA. It instantly gives you all the predecessors that came before it and all the successors that came after. It visually shows you the entire chain.
And if the business process is broken?
If the chain is broken, VBFA shows you exactly which link snapped. It tells you immediately if you somehow have a delivery document floating around without a foundational order or an order that never generated a delivery. It gives you the where.
And once VBFA tells you where the break is, you have to figure out why. The guide says you check the status tables next. VBUK and VBUP.
Yes. These are the master status tables. Header status is VBUK, line item status is VBUP. If you open these tables, they are just full of these incredibly cryptic old German acronym flags. LFSTK, FKSTK, WBSTK.
Decode those for us. Give the listener the Rosetta Stone.
Okay, sure. Let's start with LFSTK. That is your delivery status. The flag will be A if it's not processed at all, B if it's partially processed like you shipped half the boxes, or C if it is completely shipped.
Okay, that makes sense. A, B, C.
Right. Now, let's say your user is complaining that their invoice absolutely will not generate. The system just throws an error. First, you check FKSTK.
Which is the billing status.
Exactly. If FKSTK says A, it confirms it hasn't been billed yet. But here is the critical architect trick. Do not just stare blindly at the billing status flag wondering why it won't change. You have to check the predecessor steps flag.
You mean check the delivery status?
Specifically, you check WBSTK. That is the goods issue status. Did the stock actually leave the building? If WBSTK does not explicitly say C for complete, the system will never let you bill.
Because it's a rigid dependency chain. You literally cannot execute step 4 if step 3 is currently sitting at status B.
Exactly. You stop guessing wildly and you start actually reading the system flags. The flags will tell you exactly which module is holding up the train.
The source guide wraps up with this really fantastic expert testing checklist. And I loved this section because it aggressively calls out the concept of the happy path.
Oh, yes. Junior consultants love to test the happy path.
Which is what? Create order, ship order, bill order.
Exactly. Look, everyone, I typed it in and it works. The project is a success. But you proved absolutely nothing. You only proved that the software successfully functions when the data is flawless and the business world is perfect.
But the business world is literally never perfect.
Yeah.
So the guide gives us these specific break-it tests. Let's actually run through the top 5 tests listed here.
Gladly. Test 1, the credit limit test. When you are testing SD, do not test an order that is safely under the customer's limit. Actively force an order that is wildly over their limit.
You want to trigger the block.
Yes. Does it actually block the order? And more importantly, can you then go to transaction VKM3, formally release the block as a credit manager, and see if the order successfully resumes? You have to aggressively test the gatekeeper, not just walk past him.
Test 2 is the stock split.
Right. Go in and order 10 expensive items when you know for a fact you only have 5 sitting in the warehouse.
What should the system do?
Does the system blindly promise all 10 for tomorrow? If it does, your ATP configuration in OVZ9 is totally broken.
What should it do?
It should automatically create 2 separate schedule lines on the order. One line promising 5 pieces immediately, and a second line promising the remaining 5 pieces weeks from now when the next manufacturing run finishes. If it doesn't gracefully split that demand, your customer is going to open a half-empty box tomorrow with absolutely zero explanation.
Which ruins the customer relationship. Okay, test 3, account determination. Testing our friend VKOA.
For this one, you need to sell the exact same widget to 2 different customers. One domestic customer and one foreign customer.
Okay, now what are we looking for?
You follow the document flow to the FI accounting documents. Did the revenue from the domestic sale hit a completely different GL account than the foreign sale?
Because if it hit the exact same account,
Then your VKOA logic is way too generic. It's fundamentally flawed. You haven't segmented the business properly. You have to actively prove that the branching logic works.
test 4 is the reversal. This one seems super critical.
It is, and everyone skips it. Everyone exhaustively tests clicking PGI to ship the goods. Almost nobody bothers to test the PGI reversal, which is transaction VL09.
What happens when you reverse it?
Well, you run the reversal, and then you have to verify. Does the physical stock count actually go back up in MME? And crucially, does the cost of goods sold expense reverse itself back into an asset over in finance?
Let me guess, sometimes it doesn't.
You would be completely shocked how often a consultant perfectly configures the forward-moving logic, but completely forgets to configure the reverse movement types. So the goods physically come back, but the financial books are left permanently out of sync.
That is a terrifying thought for an auditor.
Yeah.
Okay, the final test, test 5, the profit center update.
This tests how the system handles dynamic data changes. You go into a material master record right now and change its assigned profit center to a brand new one. Then, you immediately create a new sales order.
Does it pick up the new one or the old one?
Exactly. This proves definitively whether your SD transaction is actively reading the master data live, or if it is lazily relying on some cached, outdated master data in the background.
Honestly, this whole checklist really highlights the stark difference between saying, I think the system works, and I mathematically know the system works.
Absolutely. It is quite literally the difference between having a smooth go-live celebration with champagne and having a catastrophic go-live disaster where you are working 90-hour weeks fixing broken invoices.
We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. From the very physical, dusty warehouse floor all the way up to the strategic, executive heights of COPA.
It is a massive journey, but that is the reality of the order-to-cash process.
If you had to distill this entire deep dive down for the listener, what is the single biggest takeaway they should internalize about this vibrating spiderweb we call SD?
It's the realization that SD is not actually about sales. It is not a sales tool.
And what is it?
SD is a translator. Its sole purpose is to translate a customer's external desire into a language that the warehouse speaks, that the corporate bank account speaks, and that the factory floor speaks. If you truly want to master SD, you do not need to memorize 100 more SD transaction codes. You need to go learn the other languages. You need to become 20% an MM expert, 20% an FI expert, and 20% a PP expert.
You essentially have to respect the handshake.
You absolutely do. The true solution architect is never just the person who knows where the most buttons are on the screen. It is the person who deeply understands why those buttons exist in the first place and what they are wired to in the basement.
I really want to leave the listener with a final thought drawn from the very end of the source document. It briefly touches on the transition to S/4HANA, the new world.
Yes. The modern cloud era.
Right. It points out that some of these exact legacy tables we just spent 20 minutes praising, like the status table VBUK, are fundamentally disappearing. They're literally being deleted and merged directly into the main document header tables to make the database run faster in memory.
That is true. The underlying database architecture is rapidly simplifying.
So, to play devil's advocate,
Yeah.
does everything we talked about in this deep dive still matter if the core tables are physically changing?
Oh, I would argue it matters more than ever. Yes, the database tables might change their names. Yes, the old gray SAP GUI screens might get replaced by sleek Fiori apps on an iPad.
But the logic,
The underlying business logic, the actual engine of order to cash, is completely eternal. You are always going to need to check a customer's credit exposure. You are always going to need to aggressively reduce available inventory when you commit to a date. You are always going to need to route revenue to the correct GL account based on complex variables. If you actually understand the core integration principles we discussed today, you can successfully troubleshoot literally any ERP system on the market, from a 1990 mainframe to a 2050 AI-driven cloud system.
Because the core operational principles just don't age.
Never. A broken supply chain is a broken supply chain no matter what UI you put on top of it.
That is a perfect place to leave it. Don't just learn how to operate the tool, learn how the engine was built.
Yeah.
And, as the expert advised earlier, go aggressively break your test system. It is really the only true way you will ever learn how the pieces fit together.
Just please make absolutely sure it is actually the test system before you break it.
Yes, please do not run Movement Type 653 or mess with VKOA in your production environment today. Thank you for listening to the deep dive. We will see you all next time.